Hi everyone! Welcome to the Campus Election Engagement Project's Fellows Local Elections Training. Today we will be reviewing elections and the basic information you should know. Voting in an election and contacting our elected officials are two ways that Americans can participate in democracy. Participation in elections depends on many factors. This includes the type of electoral system, voters' personal beliefs, places of residence, and many others. In this training, students will learn about who participates in elections and when they are held. They will gain an understanding of how and why we register to vote. They'll learn what political offices they vote for and what those officials do. And they will understand how and why it's important to get involved in elections. Who votes in elections? Let's start by taking a look at the definition of a voter. A voter is a person who votes or has the right to vote in an election. In the United States, the legal voting age is 18. By law, citizens do not have to vote, but it is an extremely important part of democracy. Citizens that participate in elections are responsible for selecting the leaders that support them and their values in government. The United States Constitution gives each House of Congress the power to be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. Because of this, voter registration and pre-registration rules and ages are different in every state. Be sure to check your state's official voter registration page to find the most detailed and up-to-date information. Most states require voter registration prior to voting in an election in order to prevent ineligible people from voting. To register to vote, you will need to fill out state-specific forms to prove that you are a U.S. citizen, at least 18 years of age or older, and meet local requirements like residency. Most states also offer pre-registration for people who are not yet 18 years old. Pre-registration allows individuals as young as 16 to sign up to automatically be registered to vote when they turn 18. Registration forms are offered on paper or electronically. After filling one out and turning it in, you may receive a voter identification card if your state requires it. January 7, 1789 was the United States' first ever presidential election. A month later, on February 4th to be exact, George Washington was elected president. Just like we did in 1789, the U.S. still uses the same electoral college system as established by our Constitution. The Constitution grants all U.S. citizens that are 18 years of age the right to vote for president. Political parties, like Republicans and Democrats, are responsible for nominating their electors at respective conventions. It is important to know that members of the U.S. Congress cannot be electors. Fun fact: the Electoral College is used only to elect the president and vice president. All other elections elect officials by direct popular vote. Electors allocated to each state and the District of Columbia are a direct representation of states' numbers of senators and representatives in Congress. Every fourth year or presidential year, on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, electors from the party with the most popular votes are elected as that party's candidates. This type of winner-take-all system occurs in every state except Maine and Nebraska. These two states allocate their electors proportionally. As you might have noticed from the 2020 presidential election, a candidate needs the majority of the electoral vote to win. So they need at least 270 votes out of a possible 538. Some founders of the U.S. questioned if it would be wise to allow everyday average citizens the right to vote, but they struggled to stay true to their Republican principles. As a result, the Electoral College was created as a compromise between a popular vote election and an election by more qualified citizens. The Electoral College and its use is written into the Constitution. For the process to change, an amendment would need to be passed. Even today, the goal of the Electoral College is to help distribute power of votes away from the most populated areas. For example, Florida gets 29 votes compared to Alaska's 3 votes. But if we looked at only popular votes, the divide between the two states would be much larger. So when are elections? How did they come about, and why do we have them? Elections occur every year. That's crazy, right? Most people only connect elections with the presidential election, which happens every 4 years. What most people fail to recognize is that people are voting and talking about elections all the time. So how does this happen? Well, state and local elections can take place any year and at different points of the year. Statewide elections for your state's governor or state legislature can be held at any time. It's the same thing for when a city wants to elect their mayor. How to participate in these elections is by being a registered voter. When you register to vote, you're able to vote in your state and local elections as well as the presidential election. It is important to remember to update your voter registration every time you change addresses because it may impact who you vote for in a state or local election. An election offers you the ability to vote for candidates that represent you best. Some elections, especially the local ones, are decided by just a handful of votes. This makes your vote even more important. Voting is not only beneficial to you, but it is also an important part of maintaining a democracy where every voice can be heard. Remember that if you want to vote, you must be 18 years old, a U.S. citizen, and register to vote by your state's voter registration deadline. The deadline could be anywhere from Election Day itself to a month earlier. Registered voters can cast their ballots at their local polling locations. If they are unable to vote in person on Election Day, they may be able to vote by mail or absentee, or even vote early in person. Let's check out some federal elections. Every 4 years, we hold an election to vote for the President and Vice President of the United States. Every 2 years, we hold a midterm election to vote for the 435 members of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the 100-member Senate. Let's take a closer look at the general election and who and what we are voting for. The President of the United States, or the POTUS, as you might have heard it referred to as, was written into the Constitution and is responsible for serving as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, commissioning officers in the armed forces, granting reprieves and pardons, receiving ambassadors, convening Congress in special sessions, appointing cabinet officials like the Supreme Court justices, and using executive power to uphold laws faithfully. To be the president or the vice president, a candidate must be a natural-born citizen of the United States and at least 35 years old and a resident of the U.S. for at least 14 years. The vice president is the second highest ranking member of the executive branch and the first in the presidential line of succession. The vice president also plays a role in the legislative branch. Should the Senate have an equal vote in a matter, the vice president votes as the tiebreaker. The position of the vice president is indirectly elected with the president. This is why we see presidential candidates select running mates. The presidential candidate directly selects who they would like to serve as their second in command. Now, shifting our focus from the president and vice president, let's talk about Congress. Congress is responsible for making laws. The legislative arm of our government, Congress is made up of two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate is the upper part of Congress and has 2 senators from each of the 50 states. The House of Representatives, or the House as most people call it, is the lower part of Congress, and the numbers of representatives are determined and awarded to states based on population. Looking at the difference between the two houses, the Senate only has 100 members that serve 6-year terms. To be a senator, you must be 30 years old when seated, be a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years, and live in the state you are representing. For the House of Representatives, their 435 members serve 2-year terms and must be 25 years old when seated. Representatives must be U.S. citizens for at least 7 years and also live in the state in which they are representing. As we learned earlier in the training, local elections take place every single year. It is a common myth that important elections only take place every 2 or 4 years. Your vote can actually make a huge difference. Learning about local and statewide elections can be hard, though. How many of you have ever gone to the polls and felt confused about what candidate to vote for, or even left a position blank because you didn't know who someone was? Don't worry, you are not alone. Local government is responsible for managing decisions that directly affect your day-to-day life. To put this into perspective, your local government is responsible for things like public transit, like your bus to work or school or the metro, rent costs, recycling, school quality, and alcohol or marijuana ordinances. This list is very long, and because of this, your local government has a lot of money and influence. So, when you vote in local elections, you are holding your officials accountable and playing your part in creating the change you want to see. Understanding the roles of local officials and their impact is critical if you want to influence choices that affect you and others in your community. Keep in mind your state and local governments lead the way when the federal government doesn't. We are going to take a closer look at some local office descriptions. Many people think that the most important elections are those for the presidency, your members of Congress at both the state and federal level, and governors. However, by solely focusing on these elections, we overlook local elections, which we keep saying happen every year. This is a problem because local elections are more likely to directly impact your life. Your city and county representatives are responsible for many government functions like public transit, roads, police, fire department, schools, parks, libraries, and housing. Your vote especially matters in local elections as the outcomes for the local elections are sometimes decided by only a few dozen votes. So let's look at a mayor and the city council. The mayor and the city manager are responsible for the city's daily operations. They can hire and fire staff, implement legislation passed by city council, and may also have the power to veto. Additionally, they play an important role in developing the annual budget for the city, although city council may amend it. In partnership with City Council, the mayor and city manager address issues including land use, housing, job programs, transportations, parks, libraries, and how much to cooperate with the federal government on areas like immigration policy or drug issues. Many cities have non-elected city managers who are responsible for their daily functions. Cities will also sometimes only have one of these two positions. The City Council has City Council members who have the final vote in creating laws and approving a city budget. They may develop their own initiatives as well as responding to the mayor's proposals. The council has the ultimate say on which laws are passed. Some city charters give their council members the power to select department heads and even have direct control over city departments or funding allocations. In these instances, the government is considered a strong council government. Now, let's move forward to talk about county executive and county commissioners and city and county clerks. The county executive and county commissioners play similar roles to the mayor and city council, but for issues affecting an entire county. They approve budgets, oversee spending, hire county employees, and set rules for broad countywide programs. County governments often serve areas of the country that are not incorporated into a municipal government, for instance with police and fire services. Some municipalities combine city and county governments into one consolidated entity, having the power of both city and county. For instance, this would be areas like Athens, Georgia, San Francisco, California, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now looking at city and county clerks, city clerks manage the records of your city and are often called the historians of the community. They are sometimes elected and sometimes appointed. The county clerk, on the other hand, supervises elections, including nominations, ballots, polling places, and poll workers. In some counties, the county clerk serves as the secretary of the county commission as well as recording minutes, setting the agenda, and handling administrative tasks for the commissioners. The county clerk may also be responsible for overseeing county records. This would be records like birth and death certificates, marriage certificates, and property deeds. The county clerk is an elected position in 24 states. We've got the ball rolling, so let's look at a few more positions. The district attorney, or the DA as you might know it as, is the chief prosecutor for a local government area, usually a county. They have the authority to investigate and bring issues to trial, prosecute criminal offenses, and make sentencing recommendations. While district attorneys can be appointed, they are likely to be elected. The DA has a particularly important impact on your community, including addressing police brutality and misconduct cases. They may work to reform the criminal justice system, address inequalities in sentencing, and advocate for changes to cash bailout standards. County governments often have district attorneys, while cities have city attorneys. City attorneys generally handle all legal matters for the city, including traffic tickets and civil lawsuits. They provide legal advice for city departments. The city attorney prosecutes misdemeanors, while the district attorney handles felonies. City attorneys are more likely to be appointed than district attorneys. Looking at the sheriff's position, unlike most officials in law enforcement in the U.S., sheriffs are usually elected. The responsibilities of sheriffs vary considerably by county. Many sheriffs have the role of a police chief, though some have limited law enforcement duties. Sheriffs can often be responsible for managing county jails and security at local government buildings. In many rural areas of the U.S., the sheriff is one of the most influential political office holders. We will wrap up our local office descriptions conversation by taking a closer look at the school board, ballot initiatives and referendums, and judicial elections. Regarding the school board, the district school board is the link between the classroom and the community. They decide how and what students are learning by setting policies, curriculums, and budgets for the school district. School board members affect funding for programs like arts, music, sports. They set the school calendar and they decide what time school begins and ends. They hire or fire school principals and set guidelines for teachers. Your vote for the school board directly affects the education of students in kindergarten through 12th grade. In the U.S., 11 states also have elected statewide school boards. Let's shift our focus a little bit to ballot initiatives and referendums. Ballot initiatives and referendums are proposals for new policies, laws, and ordinances which citizens vote to accept or reject. These may be proposed by local governments or citizens. An example would be a county commission places a referendum on their ballot for road projects that would be funded by an extra 1% on sales tax. The voters then have the opportunity to vote for this or against it. Looking at judicial elections, federal judges enjoy lifetime appointments under our system of government, but this is not the case for many judges at the state and local levels. It is important for you to cast your ballot for judges because they decide important cases with consequences for individual people, the law, and civil rights. State and local judicial elections vary by state. Most state court systems are divided into 3 levels: trial courts, appeal courts, and a state Supreme Court. Larger cities often have municipal courts, which are also known as city courts, and hear things like traffic offenses and violations of city ordinances. Let's recap. We've covered the definitions of a mayor and city manager, city council, county executive and county commissioner, city and county clerks, school board, district attorney, city attorney, sheriff, judicial elections, and ballot initiatives and referendums. SEEP offers a guide with all the information we covered. This will help you understand common local positions and their core responsibilities so that you can make the best decisions possible for your community. If you'd like to refer back to these descriptions, you will find a complete resource on our website, campuselect.org, and search Local Elections Guide. Now that we know what our local offices do, let's talk about why to get involved. Volunteering in your local community will help you develop skills, expand on empathy, and overall make you feel good. Students can customize volunteer experiences to help them work on skills that can help them in the workplace. Volunteering teaches the value of having compassion for others and how to be a productive member of your community. Being a volunteer isn't always easy or glamorous, but it is beneficial and uplifting. You will gain perspective and a deeper appreciation for your surroundings when you volunteer. No matter the age, building relationships with people is valuable. Volunteering allows you to meet new people outside of your own age and demographics. By volunteering outside of school hours forces you to manage your time between school, extracurricular activities, homework, and other activities, which will help you learn how to balance multiple commitments. Stepping outside of your circle of friends to volunteer will expose you to different aspects of your community. Gaining a new perspective on your surroundings will better your knowledge of your own community. So, how do you get involved? Step 1. Check with your school. Utilize the resources at your school to get in contact with organizations that provide volunteering opportunities, such as academic counselors, library career centers, or school websites. Step 2. Check with local organizations. Beyond the walls of your school exists a rich resource of community organizations that you can volunteer with. Consider the food bank, farmers markets, the mayor's office, the YMCA, the library, a Boys and Girls Club, local museums and theaters, and city parks and recreational departments. Step 3. Ask family or friends. Utilize your connections with family and friends to find a volunteer opportunity. Ask them if they have either volunteered at a reputable place that is accepting volunteer applications or have heard of other organizations that are worthwhile places for volunteers to invest their time. If you know of an organization or an issue that you're interested in working with, don't hesitate to reach out and ask what opportunities they might have. It helps to offer an explanation of what you have to offer and why you're interested in working with them. For international students, it can be difficult to find volunteer opportunities as an international student due to visa limitations or language requirements. International students in the U.S. looking to volunteer with certain organizations must check their visa or entry clearance conditions to make sure they are allowed to volunteer while studying. Sometimes volunteering is described as unpaid work and documentation, and not all visa statuses allow this. Step 4. Look online. The internet provides a seemingly endless database of volunteer organizations and opportunities both locally and globally. The various volunteer opportunities found online should be further investigated to ensure the organization and associated volunteer positions are legitimate and worthwhile. For greater certainty, the volunteer opportunities you find online are genuine, you should look at your school website because they have vetted lists of recommended sites to search. We recommend checking out Volunteer Match or DoSomething.org. If you can't commit to any of these volunteer options right now, that's okay. Remember, just keep voting. Make sure to register to vote anytime you move and change your address. Check out your Secretary of State's website for registration information and state-specific laws. And lastly, check out our website, campuselect.org, for more information. If you have any questions about anything we covered today, please reach out to your state director or contact our fellowship director, Jessica, at jessica@campuselect.org. Thank you all for joining us. Be sure to check out and follow us on social media or join our Slack channel for conversations and idea sharing with fellows all across the U.S. Once again, welcome to SEEP.